the perfect Valentine's Day, or so he thought. Mark had mastered the art of deception, romancing Tiffany with grand gestures while keeping Karen hidden in the shadows, promising her a future he never intended to give. But what happens when the women he underestimated start playing their own game, when the secrets he buried begin to unravel, and when the man who thought he had it all suddenly finds himself with nothing? If you discovered your partner's betrayal, would you get revenge or walk away? Let's discuss in the comments. Let us begin. Mark woke up the morning after Valentine's Day with a smile that could have lit up a room. The night before had been perfect. Tiffany, his long-term girlfriend, had been over the moon with his gestures. Everything from the candlelit dinner to the surprise delivery of her favorite flowers, followed by a night of undivided attention. She was in love, convinced she had the perfect man, the man she would spend forever with. What Tiffany didn't know was that, in the shadows of their relationship, another woman, Karen, existed. Mark had worked tirelessly to keep Tiffany in the dark about his affair. He had learned the art of deception, becoming a master at keeping his two lives separate. To Tiffany, he was the loving, devoted boyfriend. To Karen, he was the man who promised her everything, yet always managed to leave her waiting. Mark felt like he was winning. He had everything: the career, the perfect girlfriend, and the excitement of sneaking around with Karen. He thought that as long as he kept the two women separated, he could have it all. Now, February 15th was reserved for Karen. He would make it right today. He grabbed his phone and sent her a quick text. "I'm sorry for yesterday. Let's make today special. All about you, babe." He hit send and set the phone down, confident that everything would go as planned. He would get through today, and by tomorrow, things would be back to normal. Tiffany, however, had other plans. She had known about the affair for months, even though Mark had no idea she was aware. One of Mark's closest friends had let it slip, and although the truth stung, Tiffany had chosen not to confront him right away. Instead, she had let Mark think everything was fine, watching him lie and deceive her, making her feel like the fool. She would let him continue with his charade, but today she would take control. Tiffany's mind raced as she thought back to the day she had learned of Mark's betrayal. The pain had been sharp, but it was her own empowerment that fueled her now. She no longer felt like the helpless girlfriend. Today she would be the one to expose him. She would show him just how much power she held, and he would learn the hard way that his lies couldn't keep her in the dark forever. Tiffany wrapped her hands around the coffee mug in front of her, the warmth doing little to ease the simmering anger within. She had given him so many chances, so much love, and he had squandered it all. Today the truth would come to light, and she would be the one holding the cards. After finishing his coffee, Mark glanced at the clock. He needed to leave for Karen's apartment soon. He was eager to make it up to her, to prove that his feelings for her were genuine, even if he couldn't yet leave Tiffany. He grabbed his phone again, dialed Karen's number, and when she picked up, his voice was full of excitement. "Karen, I'm on my way. Let's make today all about you. I owe you an apology for yesterday." Karen listened to Mark's words, but a deep sense of skepticism filled her. She had heard these promises before. Mark had said he was ready to leave Tiffany on multiple occasions, each time promising that things would change, but nothing ever did. She had become tired of waiting for him to keep his word, and now, pregnant with his child, she wasn't sure what she wanted anymore. She sat alone in her apartment, staring at her phone. Her friends had been telling her that she deserved better, that she was worth more than being someone's second choice. Karen had ignored their advice for too long, caught in Mark's web of promises and manipulation. But today she could feel the shift inside her. She had given Mark every chance to choose her, but now she needed to choose herself. When Mark arrived, Karen greeted him with a smile, but it was strained, not reaching her eyes. "You're lucky I'm in a good mood," she said, her voice betraying the inner conflict she felt. Mark, oblivious to her hesitation, smiled back at her, believing that today would go just as planned. They spent the afternoon together, but Karen's thoughts kept drifting back to Tiffany, wondering what she was doing and what she had discovered. Karen was tired of the secrecy, tired of the lies. As Mark laughed and talked about their future together, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was living in a fantasy that would never come true. Back at her apartment, Tiffany sat surrounded by a pile of photos, receipts, and text messages, the evidence of Mark's betrayal. She had gathered it all together over the past few weeks, ever since she learned the truth. Tiffany had always suspected something wasn't right, but now the proof was undeniable. Mark's lies had been well crafted, but they were no longer enough to keep her in the dark. Tiffany wasn't angry at Karen. No, Karen had been manipulated just as she had. Her anger was reserved for Mark, for the man she had trusted, the man she had shared her life with. Mark had made her feel foolish, but that would end today. Tiffany wasn't going to cry or beg him to come back. She wasn't going to plead for him to make things right. She had wasted enough time. It was time for her to reclaim her power. She picked up her phone and sent a simple message to Karen. "Meet me at the park. We need to talk." Tiffany didn't expect Karen to respond immediately, but she knew it didn't matter. What mattered was that Mark's world was about to come crashing down, and she would be the one to bring it to him. She was in control now. When Karen arrived at the park, she was already on edge. Tiffany had called, and Karen wasn't sure what to expect. Would Tiffany confront her about the affair? Did she know? What if Tiffany was angry? Would she try to make Karen feel guilty? But Tiffany didn't look angry. She sat under a large oak tree, her posture poised, her eyes fixed firmly ahead. When Karen approached, Tiffany stood up, and the two women locked eyes. "I've known about you for months, Karen," Tiffany said, her voice calm, almost too calm. "I'm not mad at you, though. I'm mad at Mark for thinking he could play us both." Karen's heart raced as the weight of Tiffany's words sank in. Tiffany wasn't angry, she was calculated. Her composure only made Karen feel more ashamed. She had been so naive, she had believed in Mark's promises, but now everything was falling apart. Tiffany continued, "I've known you're pregnant too. I'm carrying his child as well." The words hit Karen like a ton of bricks. She had no idea. All this time, Mark had lied to both of them, stringing them along. Karen felt humiliated, betrayed by Mark and herself. But this was no longer just about Mark. This was about reclaiming control of her own life. "I'm done," Karen said, her voice stronger than she expected. Tiffany's lips curled into a small, satisfied smile. "Good. Me too." Mark arrived home later that afternoon, expecting a warm greeting from Tiffany. He had spent a wonderful day with Karen, and now was ready to shower Tiffany with affection, thinking that everything was still under control. But when he opened the door, everything froze. Tiffany and Karen were sitting on the couch together, their eyes fixed on him. There were no smiles, no pleasantries, just a cold, chilling silence. The tension in the room was palpable. "What's going on?" Mark stammered, his voice trembling as he entered the room. His stomach tightened with unease. He had no idea what was about to happen, but his instinct told him this wasn't going to end well. Tiffany stood slowly, her back straight, her eyes narrowed with quiet fury. "It's time you realized, Mark," she said, her voice low and controlled, "that you're not the only one in control here." She dropped a folder onto the coffee table, and the sound of the papers hitting the surface echoed in the silence. The folder spilled open, revealing photos, messages, receipts, and copies of texts, all the proof of Mark's affair with Karen. Tiffany didn't need to say much. The evidence spoke for itself. Mark's face drained of color as the reality of the situation hit him. He had always been able to manipulate the situation before, to keep both women in the dark. But now, his lies were exposed for the world to see. Tiffany wasn't the naive girlfriend anymore. She was someone who had seen through his deceit and was ready to fight back. "You lied to me," Tiffany continued, her voice sharp, her words cutting through the air like a knife. "You promised me everything, Mark, but instead you've been sleeping around behind my back, pretending to be the perfect boyfriend." Mark tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. He had no defense. Everything he had done, every lie, every promise, now it was all laid bare in front of him. There was no excuse. Karen stood up beside Tiffany, her expression hardening. "I'm done too," she said softly, but the strength in her voice made Mark flinch. "I'm not going to be your second choice anymore. Not to you, not to Tiffany." Mark's mouth went dry. He couldn't talk his way out of this. He was cornered, and he knew it. The women had finally realized their worth. They weren't going to wait around for him to make a decision. "Get out!" Tiffany said sharply, her voice filled with finality. She pointed to the door, and there was no hesitation in her movement. "I don't want to see you anymore." Mark didn't fight it. He couldn't. He stood there for a moment, frozen, before finally turning and walking out of the door. His heart was pounding, his head spinning with the reality of his downfall. He had lost everything. The door slammed shut behind Mark as he stepped outside. Tiffany stood in the middle of the room, staring at the spot where he had just been. The weight of the moment sank in, and Tiffany exhaled slowly, her chest tight with a mixture of relief and lingering anger. She had done it. She had finally stood up for herself, exposed Mark for the liar he was, and taken back the control that had been ripped from her. But that didn't mean it was over. Tiffany turned to Karen, who had been silently watching Mark leave. Karen's eyes met Tiffany's, and for the first time, they both shared an unspoken understanding. They had both been manipulated, both deceived by the same man. But they were no longer his pawns. They were free. "I want the divorce papers filed by tomorrow," Tiffany said, her voice steady and cold. "And don't drag this out. We're done." Mark had promised Tiffany a future together, but now that future was shattered. Tiffany had learned the hard way that promises from a man like Mark meant nothing. They were empty words, meant to keep her in his grip, to control her. But she was done with that. Her hand shook slightly as she reached for the envelope she had prepared. The divorce papers were in her hands now, and they symbolized the end of everything she had known. It wasn't just about ending a relationship. It was about reclaiming her life, her power, and her self-respect. Mark tried to plead, tried to beg her for one more chance, but Tiffany wasn't listening. She had heard it all before. "I didn't mean for things to go this far," Mark said, his voice shaky as he tried to hold on to what little dignity he had left. "Please, Tiffany. Please. I love you. We can fix this." Tiffany didn't flinch. She had heard this song before, and it was over. "Don't bother," she said firmly. "You've burned every bridge." She had already contacted the media. Tiffany didn't want revenge. She wanted justice. The world would know the truth about Mark's double life, about the man who pretended to be perfect, all while hiding his true nature behind a mask of lies. The color drained from Mark's face as the consequences of his actions hit him like a ton of bricks. "No, please don't do that. You'll ruin me. I'll lose everything. I'll lose my job, my career." Tiffany's lips curled into a small, humorless smile. "You did that all by yourself," she replied, her voice calm but resolute. Karen, who had been watching the exchange, stood up and walked over to Mark. Her eyes were hard, and she stood with an air of quiet strength. "I'm done too," she said softly. "I deserve better than this. I won't be second place anymore. Not to you, not to Tiffany. I'm walking away from all of this." Mark looked from Karen to Tiffany, his entire world crumbling around him. His career, his reputation, his relationships, everything he had built was now slipping through his fingers. Tiffany took a step forward, her eyes cold. "Get out," she said one final time. "I don't want to see you anymore." Mark didn't argue. He had no strength left. He turned and walked out of the apartment, the door clicking shut behind him. He was alone now, and his empire was falling apart. As the days passed, Karen found herself at a crossroads. For so long, she had been tangled in Mark's lies, waiting for him to make good on his promises. She had believed his sweet words, hoping that he would finally choose her, that he would leave Tiffany and start a life with her. But now, with the truth out in the open, Karen realized that she had wasted too much time on a man who didn't deserve her. Karen decided it was time to take control of her life. She wasn't going to wait around for Mark to choose her anymore. She had dreams and aspirations of her own, dreams that didn't involve being someone's second choice. She enrolled in a course to further her career. Karen had always been a hard worker, but she had been so caught up in Mark's world that she had neglected her own ambitions. Now she was determined to focus on herself, to build the future she deserved. Her apartment became her sanctuary. It was where she could breathe, where she could focus on herself without the constant chaos of Mark's lies. Slowly, Karen began to rebuild her confidence, finding strength in her independence. One afternoon, Tiffany called. Their conversation was light, filled with warmth and genuine affection. "You're doing amazing, Karen," Tiffany said, her voice radiating pride. "We've both moved on, and I can see it in you. You've got this." Karen smiled, her eyes glistening with emotion. She gazed out at the city skyline from her apartment window, realizing that for the first time in a long while, she wasn't waiting for someone else to choose her. She was making her own choices. She was in charge of her own life now. Tiffany had been preparing for this moment for days. She had collected every bit of evidence, photos, texts, voice recordings of Mark's betrayal. The way he had been playing both women, using his charm to keep them in the dark, was something that she knew had to be exposed. She was no longer afraid of the truth coming to light. Instead, she had embraced it, ready to show the world who Mark really was. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming her power, her dignity, and her future. Mark had thought he could keep everything hidden, that his lies would protect him. But Tiffany had learned the hard way that nothing stays buried forever. After carefully compiling all the evidence, Tiffany posted everything online. She didn't hesitate, didn't give herself time to second-guess her decision. It was done. The world would now see the man she had loved for so long as he truly was, an unfaithful liar who had deceived everyone around him. Within hours, the reactions were swift and brutal. The media picked up the story, and the headlines screamed across social media. Fortune 500, CEO exposed for affair, business empire in ruins. Sponsors who had once backed Mark's every move dropped him immediately. Clients who had trusted him with their businesses turned their backs. And the worst blow of all, his stock price plummeted, a direct result of his actions being exposed for the world to see. Tiffany sat back in her chair, staring at the screen with a sense of calm satisfaction. She didn't feel joy at Mark's downfall. She didn't need to. What she felt was empowerment. She had taken the power back. She had fought back against the betrayal and had come out stronger on the other side. Mark had been playing a game, but now he was the one who had lost. Mark had always believed that his success would protect him, that his reputation would keep him safe, no matter what he did in his personal life. But Tiffany knew the truth now. His empire was built on lies, and eventually, it all comes crumbling down. As she watched the media frenzy unfold, Tiffany knew she had made the right choice. She didn't need to revel in Mark's failure. She had already won. Mark had never imagined that his perfect world could come crashing down so quickly. His phone buzzed non-stop with messages and calls from angry clients, disappointed business partners, and the media demanding answers. Every text and call was a reminder of how far he had fallen. He had built his life on manipulation, but now the truth had come to light, and the world wasn't kind to liars. He had been the man who had it all, the power, the status, the respect. But in the blink of an eye, it was gone. Mark was no longer the revered CEO he once was. His company, his clients, his friends, they were all abandoning him. The empire he had spent years building was now nothing more than a pile of rubble. As the days passed, Mark found himself alone, surrounded by the remnants of his own mistakes. His employees began to leave, one by one, as news of his affair spread like wildfire. Investors pulled their funds, and the board of directors voted to remove him from his position as CEO. He was no longer the man in charge. He was no longer the man people respected. He was a cautionary tale. Mark sat alone in his office, staring at his phone, his mind racing with regret. He had everything, his career, his life, the respect of his peers, but now it was all slipping through his fingers. He had been so focused on keeping control of everything that he had never once considered the consequences of his actions. His phone rang again, but Mark didn't answer. He didn't have to. He knew the call was from his lawyer, telling him that his financial situation was about to get worse. He could feel the weight of his failure settling in, heavy and suffocating. Mark had been living a lie for so long, and now the truth had come to claim him. He had no one to blame but himself. Tiffany had done it. She had faced betrayal head-on, walked away from the life she once knew, and rebuilt her future from the ground up. She wasn't the same woman she had been before. She was stronger now, wiser, and more in control of her destiny. Tiffany had always been independent, but in the wake of Mark's betrayal, she found a new sense of purpose. She threw herself into her career, focusing on her goals with determination. She bought a new house, a place where she could start fresh, and with every step, she knew she was reclaiming the life that Mark had tried to take from her. One afternoon, as Tiffany settled into her new home, she received a message from Karen. The two hadn't seen each other much since the fallout with Mark, but Tiffany could sense a change in Karen. She wasn't the same woman who had been caught up in Mark's lies. She had grown stronger too. They met for coffee, their conversation light but meaningful. They shared stories of their lives post-Mark, of the healing they had both gone through, and of the futures they were now building on their own terms. "Here's to us," Karen said, raising her cup with a smile. "To us," Tiffany agreed, smiling brightly. They had come so far, both of them. What started as a journey of pain and betrayal had turned into one of empowerment and redemption. Tiffany looked around at the cafe, at the life she had rebuilt, and she couldn't help but smile. She had learned one powerful lesson from the past few months. No matter what life threw at her, she could handle it. She would always rise. Tiffany had turned the darkest moment of her life into the greatest opportunity for growth, and she knew that nothing, no betrayal, no lie, could ever break her again. Wow, what a ride! If you enjoyed this twist-filled journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Stories by Lane for more unforgettable drama and surprises. And before you go, tell us, what would you have done in this situation? Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story that'll keep you on the edge of your seat. Thanks for watching, and remember, twists you will not see coming await in every chapter.